It's my pleasure just to share a few closing remarks with you today as we wrap up the general session portion of this event. And I thought a lot about what I'm about to share with you. Some people have maybe heard some of these things before. But I want to share something about the concept of motivation and inspiration. And I used hierarchy of needs yesterday, and I apologize to use another hierarchy, but I used to work for an incredible businessman. He was the chairman of the board of a 100-plus-year-old financial company, and he just dripped wisdom. I mean, if you were just close to him, you learned something. I said a phrase yesterday, don't take counsel from your fears. The day I was named as a senior vice president and chief distribution officer, he pulled me aside and said, Tyler, do what you do. Be you and do what you do, and don't take counsel from your fears. Early on in my career, he taught a group of us about this concept of what motivates us. And I just want to share this in conclusion of all of the great events that we've had up to this point. He said early on in a person's career, particularly in an industry or business like network marketing, the first base level of motivation is actually just to survive, just to make it. I remember being in meetings like this in my prior industry, huge conferences. In fact, I was asked to speak at a conference in Atlanta with 6,000 attendees recently from the financial sector. And I remember being at that conference and at that meeting years and years and years ago. And not only wanting to have an opportunity, Trish told me there was a day when she saw someone up here and they had a chance to say their story. And inside a fire lit that you wanted that. You wanted a chance to stand up here. And I had those same feelings. But I also remembered that the practical nature of what I was trying to do, I needed to survive first. I just needed to survive. So many dear friends of mine that I hired into my prior life, and so many, frankly, that breaks my heart, that aren't here today, that were here a year ago. So many marvelous people that just didn't quite have that deep conviction and long enough to stay. But can I tell you this? Stay. No matter how long and how hard it is, stay. Because the first level of that motivation is to survive. I distinctly remember a time when I was no longer playing defense, how do I make a mortgage payment? Or how do I make my bills or my monthly payments? Where it shifted from a little bit of a defensive mindset to like, how do I make 20 grand a month? Or $25,000 a month? It went to offense. And this next layer kind of captures that. Now it was like, I wanted to beat somebody. I wanted to win. I wasn't worried anymore about just making the payment. I wanted to be recognized up here. I wanted to compete with my peers. Not in any kind of win-lose way. It's always a win-win. There's enough oxygen in this room for us to breathe. And anytime someone gets recognized competitively, it means nothing about my situation. It only means there's room for me on this same stage. There is no crowding out of opportunity. I win doesn't mean you lose. This is not a zero-sum game. All of us can win. But this motivation shifts out of, I just want to make it, to, now I want to compete. And I want to feel like my peers and I are in a race, and I won one of those races once or twice, or maybe multiple times. But this wise gentleman who served as my chairman for many years then went on to say that beyond competition there comes a time when maybe that's not as driving anymore, where you've had a chance to bow for the medal, or you've had a chance to stand and share your story. Doesn't mean that it's not still relevant to move forward and be motivated, but over time, maybe that's not the driver. And he said the next driver becomes your own personal excellence. It becomes almost like you're competing with your best. I used to work with a large group of people, and we would say, our motto is beat yesterday. So whatever yesterday was, let's just beat it. And that becomes a competition, if you will, with yourself. That becomes a commitment to excellence. So many people allow mediocrity to occur when excellence is possible. We've heard so much from Les Brown and from others on the stage here about how we can reach for personal excellence. But that I can feel in my life when I no longer felt like I needed to demonstrate competitively. Now I wanted to develop and grow and be the best I could be and reach for personal excellence. But when we got to this pinnacle, I distinctly remember kind of being excited. Well, what's beyond excellence? What could possibly motivate a human being beyond the concept of excelling at their trade or their craft or what they do best? And to illustrate this, he shared a story. He went to one of the great producers in the insurance and investment industry years and years ago that had received an industry accolade, probably like through the DSA or something like that, where it was just the top of all these companies together had agreed that this person had reached his pinnacle. And here he was, I think he was in his late 70s and still extremely active. And my dear friend went to him and said, "Can I ask you a question? You can't spend all the money you've made. It's impossible. And frankly, at your age, it's not like you have to be compelled to do this for any reason. What is it now at this stage of your life that motivates you?" And he looked at him kind of almost like surprised that he would ask such a question. And said, my friend's name was Alvin, and he said, "Well, Alvin, if I don't do my job and do it well, people will suffer." See, he had no longer any concern for his own personal survival. He had no concern for the competitive nature of what he was trying to prove to himself or to a peer or to anyone else. In fact, he even excelled so well in his personal life that now it had very little to do anymore with him. And he said, that's when you reach the pinnacle of motivation, which is when it becomes a cause. You see, this individual said that if I don't do my job well, people will suffer. Now, what if the deep, abiding, motivating seed inside of you, the kind of thing that generates action and movement out of you, could possibly arrive at this pinnacle where you really do what you do because you know and believe that if you don't do it, someone, somewhere, may well suffer because we didn't. It's a totally different form of motivation. It's smaller than the rest of its respective areas because maybe not too many of us arrive at that feeling, that general sense inside of us. And please don't think for a second that I don't realize the value and importance of earning and building your teams and being able to drive and build income. That's okay. In my world, 6 little kids burn through a lot of money, and I need to make a living for them. And that in and of itself, frankly, for me is a cause too. But there comes a time when all of us need to ask ourselves, well, what's my cause? What is the cause? We talk about what's your why, but even this is higher than what's your why. Because your why may be limited just to your sphere. But there's bigger things, there's broader things that can become a cause. I sat and pondered this for a fair amount of time. And I thought, what is this pinnacle? What really embodies or represents this pinnacle? Well, each time a case of our product is sold, I tend to think of it as furthering the cause. Because what's cool about that is, do you know how many neighbors come to my house on Sunday afternoons who just happen to be out for a walk, wondering if I have a little ASEA around? Yeah, it's amazing to me. Now, these are people that for any number of reasons, maybe haven't decided to join, even as a preferred customer. And my soft heart towards them says, well, yeah, I've probably got some here, and let's, and some of them, my father talked about one of them on a video that he saw at a church meeting of mine. This sweet woman comes, walks down the road, and they're struggling economically, to be candid with you guys. But she believes. She believes. And oddly enough, when the case arrives at my house, or if I have a case in the car, I look at it and I wonder sometimes to myself, where will the 4 bottles end up? Where are they going to go? You've heard me tell the story of my neighbor, a dear friend of mine who had a major, major challenge. Long before there were pretty blue boxes and starter kits and even a name, seriously long before I considered literally in excess of 1,000 people in a room cheering for this cause, I asked my dad, would this product help him, my neighbor? And he said, well, of course, I've been telling you. It's going to help. I asked if I could have some. I took it to him. And as you know, if many of you have heard the story, 3 short months later, I got a call from the leader of my church saying, are you sitting down? I said, don't start a call like that. What's going on? And he said, my friend's name is Jason. He said, Jason is whole. He's whole. And my next question was, well, did he drink it? He says he drank every drip of it for the last 3 months. And frankly, at that particular point was born my own belief and conviction, which has emerged and developed into more of a sense of cause. In May of last year, I resigned as a senior officer of a very large private equity-owned company. If you'd have told me, after 17 years of gutting myself to get to that point, that I was going to do that of my own free will,